Welcome boys and girls, Christine here with a discussion about Slaanesh in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires, and the kind of things that hopefully Creative Assembly will be improving on with respect to Tides of Torment. While they have not made any big announcement in a blog post or a trailer about the kind of things they will be improving in Slaanesh, the chats they've had with developers on what areas they're looking to do for Slaanesh have been encouraging. So things like unit recruitment, casualty replenishment, things like the research tree are things that the developers in CA Sophia have mentioned. So that's good because those are some of the key issues of Slaanesh. The research tree, for instance, is not especially great. And like many other research trees that have been in the game for a while, it could use improvement. Slaanesh is also one of the only races in the game that has no real way of improving casualty replenishment. But before we talk about the battle situation, we should talk about the campaign situation. Slaanesh has the following campaign dynamic, if you will. They do work pretty strongly in a campaign, be it economically or vassalization-wise. The power is absolutely there. Problem is, of course, you have different ways of vassalizing factions. You can do it for regular diplomacy, you can do it with seductive influence, which is also tied to diplomacy because you make deals with factions and then you get seductive influence, or you can just outright subjugate a faction, for instance. So if we go over here with Crix and we take down their last settlement, we can subjugate them. And you are heavily encouraged to do this as Slaanesh because it gives you devotees. So subjugating factions is not just a minor affair, it is in fact pretty much required if you are playing one of these campaigns. But of course the problem is when you end up in that kind of situation with any faction, it is very easy to end up in a position in a campaign where you basically have nothing to lose. The reason you don't have anything to lose is because vassals do give you power. It makes it so other factions don't necessarily want to declare war on you, which just means you are not at risk. It's kind of the worst campaign dynamic to have, where you are pushed to engage with a system that in effect makes any kind of interesting dilemmas in a campaign not happen. And that's one of the core issues I think does exist in a Slaanesh campaign. Consider Nakari's situation. The only interesting aspect of a Nakari campaign is early on, at least for a single player campaign. Multiplayer, it's a very different affair, though to be honest, Slaanesh in multiplayer can be fun, also can be irritating to deal with because, you know, the string of endless vassals that Slaanesh has. But all the same, you have Alariel, you have Tyrion, you have Elfarion. You can vassalize all three of these factions. So the only interesting portion of a campaign as Nakari is when you're dealing with them in the early game. Because once you vassalize them, it is GG, well played. No one's going to be able to stop you. I mean, even if you just outright conquered Ulf 1, very few people would be able to stop you, because Ulf 1. But when you vassalize the Golden Trio, as you could call them, of Elfarion, Tyrion, Alariel, nothing is going to stand in your path. It is an issue of vassalization, subjugation, seductive influence. It's the core problem is that vassals are just fairly dull. There's very little downside in them. There's no management. There's nothing interesting. And the Allegiance point system, the war coordination, is a decent enough idea, but it's also very slow and not an especially engaging system. I think Nobunaga's Ambition Sphere of Influence had a much better influence system with regards to vassals and allied factions, because you could earn points with factions much quicker, but then you had to decide what to do. Like, oh, do I want those troops to immediately march out or gain control of an army? And you would do this constantly in that game. I see some of that in here, but it's, again, the pacing of Warhammer 3 versus the pacing we have in various campaign systems. That is the problem. And hopefully that is what they're going to improve with Slaanesh. But that's not even the biggest issue. The biggest issue, beyond things like limited recruitment slots, casualty replenishment, is the kind of army Slaanesh has. Yes, we're going to get DLC units, monstrous units, Praeton, champions of Slaanesh, legendary hero, hero lord, etc. But here's the problem with Slaanesh from a unit perspective. You have a great army for field battles. What you don't have is a good army for sieges, and there's a lot of sieges. You have no easy way of breaking through walls. In fact, you have no artillery, and very few units with siege attacker, so you're constantly dealing with gates with a faction that's all about mobility, speed, flanking, so you have that dilemma. It means a lot of the units that you have in your roster are useless because of the siege situation, and you're basically heavily encouraged to get Champions of Chaos, get Forsaken of Slaanesh, and then get Chaos Warriors of Slaanesh, and then Chosen of Slaanesh. It is not a fun system, it's not really interesting to deal with, and the problem with Chosen of Slaanesh is that they're sword and board, basically, or Hell Scourges. So these are durable enough units, they're fast enough in the case of Chosen of Slaanesh, but the problem is damage dealing capability. See, Khorne is fun with Chosen because Khorne has Chosen with dual weapons. And then on top of that, Khorne also has a lot of different ways of approaching both field battles and siege battles. And beyond the fact that Khorne has a much better situation with casualty replenishment, recruitment, global recruitment. Even vassalization is more interesting with Khorne because you're not just using subjugation and seductive influence, you can only do so for diplomacy. So while that can lead to some ridiculous outcomes in a Khorne campaign, at least it feels more earned than, oh, I just beat the crap out of X faction, now they serve me. And I'm not quite sure it's going to be better with the Kala or the Mask. If all we get with the Kala and the Mask is just more campaigns where it's like, oh, go fight 100 different battles in a campaign, I don't think that's going to be a very interesting dynamic whatsoever. Like, literally, they mentioned momentum with the Mask, and with the Kala, there was this developer discussion where one of the devs who is working on various updates for Warhammer 3 asked one of the guys who is working on the DLC, what's the difference between the Kala and Nakari? And the argument that was made was that the Kala is going to be more focused about getting vassals through military action than Nakari, who's more focused through diplomacy. Because you do have diplomatic options, you have the cults, proliferate cults, seductive influence, various diplomatic benefits. So hopefully it ends up working better. But yes, we do need an overhaul, not necessarily with diplomacy, but with vassals, vassal engagements, potential of vassals, giving territory to vassals even. Because giving territory to vassals can be pretty frustrating because you need to have a direct line of territory between the vassal and the territory you want to give them. But yeah, unit roster is one of the key issues. It can be a fun race to play in battles, but it's also incredibly limiting in many of the battles we actually fight. So minor settlements, sieges in particular, and then you end up with a kind of one-dimensional campaign that's fun once, but then it falls apart very quickly on replay. That's kind of the perspective I have of Nakari, and hopefully that's not what we're going to have with Tides of Torment. Questine signing out.